You're watching News at Prime. We start here. The South African government is remaining tight-lipped about its strategy going into its meeting with the White House and, of course, US President Donald Trump tomorrow. President Cyril Ramaphosa and Trump will meet in the Oval Office in less than 24 hours to discuss the resetting of ties between the two countries. In what is billed as a high-stakes meeting, trade deals will be high on the agenda. Newzroom Afrika senior politics reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo joins us live now from the embassy in Washington. Ziyanda, good evening to you, our time, and President Ramaphosa speaking in the last hour, and I suspect you had a thing or two to do about that. Well done on getting him to speak to us ahead of that meeting. But let's start with the murmurs around Elon Musk and Starlink. Where do we stand tonight?
Oh boy, Oli, that's going to be quite the topic, isn't it, over the next couple of hours? Bloomberg is reporting that a deal has already been put on the table before the meeting with Donald Trump and President Cyril Ramaphosa meet in the Oval Office tomorrow. There's so much to chew on when it comes to that. The first thing is how, of course, this will likely be viewed as President Ramaphosa's administration circumventing our country's employment equity laws, in particular the Electronic Communications Act, in an effort to accommodate Musk. And it's also another another layer to this is the fact that, you know, Musk and Trump's relationship is in question right now. In fact, it seems like he's not within Trump's inner circle. So if this is true and Bloomberg's reports is true, what would have informed this? And I guess what adds to this from a Newzroom Afrika perspective is the fact that we tried to speak to Minister Parkstyle before the 10 a.m. start of the meeting here in Washington at the SA Embassy here. And now we're told that Parkstyle only wants to speak to the media after the meeting in the Oval Office tomorrow. So the South African government remaining tight-lipped about their strategy and what they have on the table right now. But certainly, if this is true, it's going to raise a lot of questions and a lot of pushback from many in the country back home in South Africa. And of course, already there's been lots of talk about the president not selling the country and our sovereignty being very critical. And I want you to listen to what the president had to say in response to my question exactly around this part on sovereignty and what is going to be discussed between the two presidents tomorrow.
The most important, that's what has brought us here. We want to come out of the United States with a really good trade deal, investment promotion. We invest in the United States and they invest in us, and we want to strengthen those relations, and we want to consolidate good relations between our two countries. So I'm very positive. I'm looking forward to the discussions we're going to.
And so that's what the president is saying, and he really very confident, Oli. The anxiety that many of us had leaving South Africa, coming here to Washington. Are we walking into an ambush? What is going to take place? How is Cyril Ramaphosa, the man, going to prepare for this? That seems to be dissipating slowly, I can tell you, from the officials behind the scenes, journalists, pundits are all seemingly the fact that the president made it into the country, had a red carpet rolled out for him as per the case when there's a working visit. It seems like things are moving, and the president really saying that geopolitical issues will be on the table, including Israel. And what's important about that, Oli, is how things continuously seem to shift, which is why, which might rather give South Africa more to leverage on. So for an example, we all know what Donald Trump has said about South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, but the relationship between Trump and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu isn't on good terms right now. Their relationship seems to be strained. So these are some of the key points and nuggets that the South African president can also use to his advantage going into that meeting. Take a listen to this.
We are going to have an opportunity to discuss geopolitical issues, not only Israel, but also Ukraine. And so all these matters will be on the table for proper discussion. And we are very rational when it comes to discussing global and geopolitical matters. And we will put South Africa's interests first, and our own foreign policy positions will be well clarified.
So that's the president there a short while ago before entering the South African embassy here in Washington. And, you know, he's going to get a briefing from his ministers, Parkstyle and John Steenhuisen, meeting with the trade minister or the trade counterpart here in the United States. So we don't know what has been discussed, how far discussions have gone. Yesterday we were told, and today by Durko, that there's not going to be too much detail but when it comes to these deals, but more at the level of some kind of agreement that is going to be discussed. And, you know, one of the key components of this gathering is going to be John Steenhuisen. And earlier, I asked him quite bluntly whether or not he believes, as a white South African man who is leading up a department that oversees white farmers, and his recent comments at the Nampo Agriculture Expo that there is no white genocide, whether or not John Steenhuisen believes he will add to South Africa's case that there is no land confiscation and that there is no white genocide in South Africa. This is how he responded to me earlier on.
And we had a very open and frank exchange about how we can ensure mutually beneficial trade between South Africa and the United States of America, reiterating the importance of both markets for each other. Obviously, a lot of emphasis from America's side on wanting to rebalance some of the trade, and obviously from our side wanting to retain market access, but not with a 30% tariff. And so that was the discussion yesterday. We'll obviously be briefing the president today on the outcome of that meeting, what they put on the table, and some solutions on the way forward. But certainly, I think it was a constructive.
All right, Ziyanda, as we wrap this up, let's talk about what you are hearing on the ground. There are strong suggestions that the business delegation that may be traveling with President Ramaphosa may include in it one of South Africa's successful business people who also happens to be an Afrikaner, Johan Rupert. Have you caught sight of him at all? What do you know? Is he in Washington?
Well, yes, I've heard that he is somewhere here in Washington. I don't think he's forming part of the official and formal government delegation, but Johan Rupert has the ear of Donald Trump and has contacts here in the White House. And so I think the president also, at a personal level, having a relationship with Johan Rupert, and Rupert also having some ties to the White House, might be exactly what is going to assist ameliorate the relationship. We've been speaking over the last couple of days, since we arrived here in Washington, that it's going to boil down to the personal relations, the nitty-gritty. So, I mean, South Africa and Ramaphosa is the first African head of state to come to the White House since Trump's return on the 20th of January. That's an important point. And the fact that you have a Johan Rupert somewhere here in Washington, maybe doing some backdoor conversations and facilitations, that might also be assisting with South Africa's case as a white Afrikaner whose businesses, his family businesses, are rooted and, you know, in the pre-1994 dispensation and continuing well into our democracy, you know, being able to explain that this whole thing about a white genocide is simply not true, and Johan Rupert is a white Afrikaner man. And so these are going to form part of the optics of what takes place, both when the cameras are switched on tomorrow in the Oval Office and behind the scenes. And maybe that's why you hear and see Ramaphosa speaking with the kind of buoyancy, saying that South Africans don't fear humiliation. He's not scared, and he also doesn't like to lose, whether on the golf course or on the geopolitical scene. So this is also an indication of perhaps some of the things that are happening behind closed doors that are informing the confidence of the South African government and how they are going to be continuing with these discussions behind the doors, in the doors behind me, I should say, here at the South African Embassy in Washington.
Live for us in the United States, Washington, D.C. Ziyanda Ngcobo, thank you very much indeed.